Good afternoon. My name is Felicia Davis, and this is my course project evaluation for my NUR 456 Senior Practicum at ECPI University. The purpose of this project was to find something within my facility and my department that I thought that I could change, something that I was noticing needed some further development. It took location in a 12-bed intensive care unit and an 18-bed telemetry unit. The topic that I decided to change was hourly rounding. The purpose was to provide evidence-based practice to staff on importance of purposeful rounding and reevaluate the barrier of our current policy. The goal is to design, implement, and evaluate UNC's hourly rounding process, educate staff on the importance of purposeful rounding, and decrease any potential barriers. Objectives: conduct research on purposeful rounding, create pending policy changes to implement over a 2-week period, and analyze the outcome. As I stated, the first objective was to evaluate evidence-based practice for purposeful rounding. Then we wanted to implement Carolina Care rounding, and I'll talk about that more going forward. And then evaluate the results of implementation and identify any barriers after our implementation. So the completion of strategies with examples of the evidence for our first objective, which was evaluate evidence-based practice for purposeful rounding. I conducted a research and researched 10 peer-reviewed literatures, evaluated other hospital policies for hourly rounding. And this allowed me to kind of compare and contrast what we had and didn't have and what we could implement to make our policy better. And I also created a lesson plan and educational resources. The lesson plan allowed me to understand what I wanted to talk about and the topics that I needed to touch on. And the educational resources allowed me to give a visual to my staff. Implement Carolina Care rounding. Carolina Care for UNCF Health is how we interact with our patients. It's almost like a script of things you need to touch on and wording that you can say to your patient. So we wanted to implement that into our purposeful rounding. So I conducted an educational staff meeting on hourly rounding, received permission from my manager to implement that for a 2-week trial. And we also did a 5-question post quiz. I also had my staff sign that they understood and acknowledged and received the information that they got from the staff meeting. We also evaluated the results of the implementation and identified any barriers. I got with my staff and did a survey on what they thought we could continue to change. And then for the 2 weeks, I sat and observed the interaction of the nurses with our hourly rounding and the patients, how the patients received it. Did we have a decrease in call bell usage, an increase in patient satisfaction, and were the patient's needs being met? I also had a meeting with my manager to go over hourly rounding documentation for the 2 weeks. She kind of monitored within our MAR were the nurses going in on the MAR and doing their hourly rounding each hour. The outcome of this was a new policy officially to be implemented. Proper education of purposeful rounding and how it should be conducted within UNC Caldwell. We also had a reduction in rounding documentation within MAR to reduce time consumption. That was one of the bigger barriers that nurses were saying that they were having, that our MAR was too time consuming. They were having to select 20 different things to show that they were in the patient's room. The patient was awake or asleep, eyes open, uh, repositioned, just little different tasks that you should be doing during rounding. So our manager had it changed to where we can select rounding uh, as an observation, and that is all inclusive of all the things that we were checking. So that cut down on the time consumption that nurses were complaining about. Application of project in practice, more knowledge to the importance of proper hourly rounding, conducting my first educational staff meeting for staff through evidence-based practice and research, peer evaluation, utilization of a mentor, and detailed lesson plan, a reduction in fall occurrence potential, reduced call bell usage, and patient satisfaction. These were all things that through this project, I think that we can develop, such as the safety and the decrease in call bell usage and patient satisfaction. That is the overall goal of purposeful rounding. Value of project to lifelong learning. Um, I believe this project helped me on conducting peer-to-peer education. Because I am a new nurse, this is something I never had to do before. It actually is one of our checkoffs if we want to be looked at for our clinical ladder. We have to teach a educational class. So my manager let me know that that checkoff has been completed. Researching evidence-based information. Of course, that's something you always need to do because nursing is ever changing, and we need to understand how evidence-based practice is utilized and what the evidence and research that has been conducted for that particular topic. Process of updating policy change. I had no clue that it was as tedious as it was, as far as creating the educational materials. You have to get with the education department at a hospital, work with them. Um, my mentor had to be included. My manager had to be included. It had to be checked off that everything that we needed to educate other nurses on was included. Um, as far as the policy change, my manager had to go talk with uh, higher departments, overall departments, because it would be implemented throughout the hospital, and get with lean and talk to them about any quality changes. And it also had to be talk to the board about the policy changes before they could actually change anything. And then my speaking skills were also something that I had to engage during this task because I had to speak to other staff members who have been nurses longer than me. So I had to thoroughly understand any of the material and think about any questions that may come up about the topic of hourly rounding. These are my references that I utilized to educate myself on creating this PowerPoint and the PowerPoint that I utilized for my educational material. This ends my PowerPoint for this project. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. Thank you and have a great day.